From the rooftop, I could see everything. The full scope of the catastrophe spreading through the village like plague. Dozens of infected stumbled through streets. Fresh ones still learning to move their hijacked bodies. Older ones with fluid movements that suggested the organisms had fully integrated. All hunting. All seeking new hosts with single-minded purpose. And the amalgamations. God, the amalgamations. A two-body horror stumbled past in the street below. Human and horse fused together. Impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Some sections solid muscle and fur. Others pure translucent goo showing organs from both creatures pulsing together in synchronized rhythm. 3 villagers merged into a single mass. Their faces still recognizable on the surface. Positioned at random angles. One upside down, another sideways. Mouths opening and closing soundlessly. Limbs jutting from the central slime body at impossible angles. Wrong joints. Wrong number of fingers. And there, at the edge of my vision, the thing I didn't want to look at directly. Something that might have been a bear. And a bull. And parts of 3 humans. Held together by massive amounts of black-green slime. Some sections showing intact fur and muscle. Others completely dissolved into acidic goo through which bones and organs were visible. Moving together. Merged. Transformed into something that should not exist. My stomach heaved. I pressed my hand over my mouth, fighting the urge to vomit. This was wrong. Unnatural. Bodies weren't meant to merge like this. Weren't meant to dissolve and reform into nightmares held together by parasitic slime. I wanted to run. Wanted to close my eyes and pretend this wasn't happening. Wanted Dane here so badly it physically hurt. But I was alone. On a roof. Watching a village dissolve into horror. Buildings were phasing at the edges. Wooden walls becoming organic. Flesh-like. Stone foundations developing pustules that swelled and burst. Leaking more slime. More infection. The village was dying. Transforming. Everything the slime touched became part of it, and I had absolutely no idea how to survive this. Terror crashed over me in waves. My hands shook where they gripped the roof tiles. My breath came too fast, too shallow. Tears burned hot behind my eyes. I was supposed to have 6 months to train. 6 months to learn advanced techniques. 6 months before facing anything this dangerous. Instead, I was here. Alone. Watching people become monsters. Watching the world end one infection at a time. Movement in an alley below caught my attention. A child. Maybe 8 years old. Running with the desperate speed of pure terror. Her dress was torn. Her face streaked with tears and dirt. She clutched something against her chest. A doll, maybe. Or a stuffed toy. Behind her, the bear bull thing crashed through debris. It was worse up close. So much worse. A nightmarish fusion of at least 5 organisms held together by massive amounts of black-green slime. Parts of it were still solid. A section of bear fur and muscle on one shoulder. Bull horns jutting from what might be a head. A human arm with recognizable fingers reaching from the central mass. Other sections had dissolved completely into translucent goo. Through it, I could see the chaos inside. Multiple rib cages. Organs from different species pulsing together. Bones that didn't connect properly but moved anyway. Slime dripped constantly from its body, leaving acidic puddles that ate into cobblestones with hissing sounds. Multiple mouths opened across its surface. Bear muzzle, bull jaw, human lips, all working independently. Some with teeth. Some just gaping holes in the slime, eyes positioned randomly. A bear's eye on what used to be human chest. Bull eyes where shoulders should be. Human eyes staring from the creature's flank. All of them aware. All of them tracking the running child. The girl tripped. Fell hard. Her toy flew from her hands. She scrambled backward against a wall with nowhere left to run. The amalgamation charged. I didn't think. Couldn't think. If I thought about what I was doing, I'd freeze. And freezing meant watching that child die. I jumped. Binding threads erupted from my hands mid-fall. Rainbow light wrapping around a roof beam, slowing my descent just enough. I hit the cobblestones in a crouch that sent pain shooting through my knees. Sharp. Immediate. I ignored it. Landed between the creature and the child. The thing was bigger from ground level. Taller than 2 men. Wide as a wagon. Its shadow fell across me like death. This close I could smell it. Sweet rot and decay and something chemical. The stench made my eyes water. Made my stomach clench. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to move. Get away. Let someone else handle this. Someone stronger. Someone trained. Someone who wasn't a merchant's daughter, barely a year into training. But there was no one else. The amalgamation charged. I wove desperately. Rainbow threads erupted in a net pattern. Black oil transforming to light mid-cast. The threads wrapped around the thing's mismatched legs. Bear haunch. Bull limb. Something that might have been human thigh. I pulled, tightened. The net constricted. The creature crashed down with earth-shaking impact. Cobblestones cracked under its weight. Slime sprayed outward. I threw up a barrier instinctively. The acidic goo hit rainbow light and sizzled, eating at my binding, trying to dissolve through. The amalgamation thrashed. More slime ruptured from sections. Spraying. Splashing. I poured more ink into the net. Compressing. Squeezing. Flesh burst. The central slime organism ruptured, spilling its liquefied contents across the alley. I gagged. Couldn't help it. The smell. The sight. Bodies reduced to goo and bone fragments and things that used to be organs. This was disgusting, horrifying, wrong in every possible way. Tears streamed down my face. I was crying and casting simultaneously, sobbing while rainbow threads wrapped around horrors that used to be people. More creatures lumbered into the alley, drawn by the noise, by the bright rainbow light of my magic, shambling infected villagers, goo masses on their chests, faces still recognizable but leaking black-green from every orifice. Mouths, noses, eyes, ears. I recognize some of them. The woman who'd sold vegetables in the market, the stable master who'd negotiated prices, a child not much older than the girl behind me. They'd been alive hours ago. Normal. Human. Now they were monsters. Puppeted by parasites. Hunting for more hosts to infect and merge. A wolf-dog hybrid dragged itself forward, its back half completely dissolved into slime. The front still fur and teeth. Moving on front paws while goo propelled it from behind. Something that might have been a tree. With human arms grafted to its trunk. Roots replaced by slime tentacles that left acidic trails. I bombarded them with binding magic. Nets that immobilized and constricted until bodies ruptured. Threads that wrapped and crushed like massive constrictors. Barriers that deflected lunging attacks, then snapped forward like hammers to smash creatures against walls. I sent threads punching through torsos like bodkin arrows, piercing straight through goo masses and the bodies they piloted. Each spell made me want to vomit, made me want to curl up and sob, made me want to run until I couldn't run anymore. But I kept casting, because the alternative was worse. Because that little girl was clutching my leg and sobbing. Because stopping meant dying. Meant becoming one of those shambling horrors. The spells were devastatingly effective. Each creature's slime body rupturing and spilling when compressed hard enough. When smashed with sufficient force. But there were too many. For every one I killed, 3 more pushed into the alley. Fresh infections and small amalgamations drawn by the commotion, by the magic, by the uninfected prey. I was losing ground. Backing up step by step. The girl clutched my leg in terror. I could feel her shaking. Hear her crying. After dozens of rapid castings, fine tracings of black ink finally began to appear on the backs of my hands. Delicate lines like dark veins spreading across my skin. The accumulation was climbing. But I was far stronger than I'd been at the academy. Able to sustain combat that would have overwhelmed me months ago. Not strong enough for this. Not nearly strong enough. "We have to run," I said. My voice came out shaky, broken. "Can you run?" The girl nodded against my leg. I grabbed her hand, pulled her with me as I ran. Binding threads erupted behind us, creating temporary barriers, buying seconds. I vaulted over debris using threads like climbing rope. Hauled the girl with me when she stumbled. We burst into a side street and nearly collided with survivors. 4 villagers armed with farming tools. A caravan trader I recognized. All backing toward a building at the village edge.
"The watchtower,"
the trader shouted. He pointed.
"Stone walls, high ground."
I understood instantly. Defensible position. Stone the infection couldn't dissolve as easily. Height for visibility. Go! I wove protective barriers around the group as shambling creatures closed in from multiple directions. Move! We sprinted together. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. The girl's hand was slick with sweat in mine. Fresh infections staggered toward us. People I might have seen in the tavern hours ago. Now with massive slime parasites anchored to their chests and backs. Flesh actively melting where the organisms touched them. Movements jerky as the slime learned their bodies. A 2-body fusion of human and horse. Impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Some sections showing recognizable features. A human face screaming soundlessly. Horse teeth in a too-wide jaw. Other sections, pure translucent goo through which organs pulsed and bones shifted. A woman fell. Ankle twisted. She cried out in pain. I hauled her up with binding threads. Simultaneously created a wall of rainbow light that deflected 3 infected villagers. I recognized their faces beneath the black-green mucus leaking from their eyes. The baker who'd sold bread this morning. The man who'd laughed at the minstrel's terrible singing. A teenage boy who'd been playing in the street at sunset. All gone now. All transformed. My vision blurred with tears. This was wrong. So wrong. They didn't deserve this. Didn't deserve to become monsters. To lose everything that made them human. We reached the tower door. Heavy oak banded with iron. The trader yanked it open. We piled inside. I slammed it shut behind us. Immediately began weaving reinforcements. Threads wrapped around the doorframe. Sank into stone. Creating a lattice that glowed with barely contained chaos energy. Outside, bodies slammed against the door with meaty thuds. Flesh and slime impacting together. The sound made my stomach turn. Hands scrabbled at the edges. Some still human with recognizable fingers. Some translucent goo showing bone structure. Some fused amalgamations of multiple hands merged together. Through narrow windows, I could see dozens of creatures converging. Fresh infections drawn by the concentration of uninfected prey. Small amalgamations of 2 or 3 bodies. Larger horrors still forming in the streets as the slime organisms consumed and merged their hosts. We were surrounded. My hands shook. Not from fear. From the addictive rush of sustained binding. The magic felt good. Too good. Like indulging in something private and thrilling. The ink had covered my hands in fine lacework now. Delicate black patterns spreading across my skin. Just beginning to creep up my forearms in faint lines. Solo casting made me ache for Dane. For the way convergence magic felt when we cast together. How solo binding was pleasure, but convergence was ecstasy. How our chaos and order created something transcendent that neither could achieve alone. I wished desperately that he were here. That we could end this threat together. Feel that connection. That perfect synchronization that made everything else pale. But he wasn't here. Wouldn't be here for 6 months. I was alone. With terrified survivors. Surrounded by horrors. Fighting with magic that felt good while people died. The wrongness of it all crashed over me. I sank against the wall, put my face in my hands, and sobbed.
Miss?
One of the villagers touched my shoulder hesitantly.
Are you hurt?
I shook my head. Couldn't speak. Just cried. Great racking sobs that shook my whole body. I was terrified, exhausted, disgusted by what I'd seen, what I'd done, the bodies I'd burst, the people I'd killed who were already dead but still moving.
We need you.
The trader's voice was gentle.
Those things out there, they're not stopping, and you're the only one who can fight them.
I knew we needed to fight. Knew stopping meant dying. Knew these people depended on me. But I was so tired. So scared. So desperately wanting someone else to handle this. Someone stronger. Someone who knew what they were doing. Someone who wasn't me. The little girl I'd saved wrapped her arms around my waist. She was crying too. Shaking. Terrified. I held her. Let myself cry for another minute. Then forced myself to breathe. To think. The stairs. My voice came out rough. Broken. I'll guard the stairs. You all stay on the second floor. Stay back. Stay quiet. Stay out of my way. They nodded. Started moving. Grateful to have someone giving orders. Even if that someone was a crying merchant's daughter who wanted to run away. I positioned myself at the stairs leading to the second level. Wiped my face. Tried to stop shaking. The creatures outside found weaknesses. A window with rotted shutters. A crack in the foundation. Places where slime could seep through. I wove reality anchors at each breach point, creating zones where the infection couldn't spread. Maintaining multiple anchors simultaneously while preparing offensive spells felt intoxicating. Each spell a rush of power that made me want to cast more. Do more. Push harder. But I was starting to notice the ink building up now. The fine lacework spreading further up my forearms. Delicate black patterns beginning to trace across my wrists. The addictive pleasure of sustained casting made it easy to ignore the accumulation. But I forced myself to pay attention, to track the dark lines as they grew. My emotional control started to slip. I laughed when a creature's slime body ruptured from compressed binding threads, spilling its liquefied contents. Then immediately wanted to cry at the waste of human life still visible in the dissolved remains. The fragmentation was starting. Early stages, not dangerous yet, but present. The infected kept coming in waves. First the shambling individuals, fresh infections with recognizable faces beneath the black-green mucus, goo masses on their chests, actively digesting their torsos, then small amalgamations of 2 or 3 bodies. A human-horse fusion with both faces screaming soundlessly. Sections of solid flesh next to translucent goo showing merged organs, then larger horrors that tested my barriers with horrifying strength. A 6-body amalgamation crashed against the door. Bear, bull, 3 humans, and what might have been a wagon horse. All held together by massive slime organism. Some sections were still identifiable. A bear's paw with claws. Human fingers grasping. Bull horns jutting from the mass. Other sections had dissolved completely, showing the chaos inside through translucent goo. Multiple rib cages fused together. Hearts from different species beating in synchronization. Intestines from various creatures tangled and pulsing. Eyes positioned randomly across the surface. Human eyes on what used to be horse flank. Bear eyes where a shoulder should be. All moving independently. All aware. I rotated through every binding spell I knew. Nets to immobilize that wrapped around both flesh and slime. Threads that punch through bodies like bodkin arrows. Or wrapped and crushed like constrictors until organisms ruptured. Barriers to deflect that held against the acidic dripping. Concussive spheres that I rapidly condensed and released to create explosions that blast creatures apart. Hammer strikes of solidified binding that bludgeoned amalgamations into paste and spilled goo. Each successful kill accelerated my ink accumulation. Each spell made the next one feel better, more necessary, more right. The survivors huddled on the second floor, watching through gaps in the floorboards as I fought. Hours passed. The horde thinned but didn't stop, and I realized with growing horror that the amalgamations were getting larger. The slime organisms outside were actively consuming bodies and merging, growing, creating bigger and more dangerous forms while I fought. After hours of sustained casting, the ink accumulation had become severe. Black marks had spread up my arms, across my chest, climbing my neck in dark tracery that pulsed faintly with each heartbeat. My emotional control slipped in strange ways. I felt like two people sometimes. One Liv who was terrified and wanted to run. Another who found the whole situation darkly hilarious and wanted to laugh at the absurdity. The thoughts didn't quite merge properly anymore. Competing perspectives flickering through my consciousness. But I kept casting because the alternative was watching these people become slime-infected horrors. Their bodies consumed and used to create even larger amalgamations. I kept casting because stopping meant admitting I couldn't do this, couldn't survive this, couldn't save anyone. I kept casting because the magic felt good, and the ink made everything sharper and brighter and more intense. I kept casting because I was alone and terrified, and the only thing between these people and death. I kept casting until my hands were black to the elbows, until my chest was laced with dark patterns, until my neck showed tracery like living tattoos. I kept casting until I couldn't tell if I was laughing or crying anymore. I kept casting until dawn.